before I came to America, my favorite genre of movie was the Western.
Hmm.
That was my main exposure to America initially. And in the typical plot of a Western, you've got a small town. It's called Shinbone or Pleasantville. We may as well call it America because
Right.
it's running pretty well and it's got an old sheriff. And I think of that guy as like Paul Ryan. It's like the GOP establishment.
Right.
Um, but then some ruthless gangsters take over the town. And they shoot the place up, and they take over the saloon and the provision store. Everybody's terrified. And the gangsters have proven that there's nobody in the town that can overturn their operation. They've got it locked down. And Shinbone is not Shinbone anymore, right? But
Right.
then over the mountain comes the Clint Eastwood figure, the lone gunman, the outsider. That's Trump. Now, the remarkable thing is that even though the townspeople don't understand this gunman, they don't understand the outside. Oh, who is this guy? What's his background? He seems like he's very shady. We know nothing about him, and so on. The truth of it is the gangsters have a more accurate appraisal. They recognize right away this is the guy who could take us all down. So they mobilize against him. So if you want to understand, like, why is it Trump? Like, why only Trump? The answer is that from the point of view of the gangsters, the Democrats, they can handle Paul Ryan. They know how to deal with any other Republican. They've got them under control, but they can't control Trump. And Trump is an 800-pound gorilla that is fully equal to the task of taking on the 800-pound gorilla on their side. And the 800-pound gorilla on their side, by the way, is not Kamala Harris. She's the ventriloquist dummy of the 800-pound gorilla, as you know.
Yeah.
But collectively, the left is an 800-pound gorilla, and Trump is their equal, and that's why they're so desperate to get him.
A huge shift is taking place on planet Earth. People seem to be waking up. Tired of the way things used to be, they are creating something brand new and changing the world we live in. My name is Brad Szollose, and I get to sit down with the next generation of idea makers, the disruptors, and the game changers. Everyday people, just like you and me, from all over, who are doing amazing things to Awakened Nation. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today really needs no introduction. It's Dinesh D'Souza. Welcome to Awakened Nation, Dinesh.
My pleasure. God, thanks for having me.
You bet. I just want to tell everybody your films have exposed the corruption in America from the highest levels, exposing the deep state and the agenda of the left. You've been called U.S. conservative provocateur, an American right-wing political commentator, and a conspiracy theorist. Those are all insults, by the way.
It sounds like you've been reading my Wikipedia page. It's
yes,
like it was written by my worst enemies. So it's
I
Wikipedia is a
know.
hit job, you know?
I know. I'm reading this thing and I'm going, oh, come on. Anyways, your films, Hillary's America, Death of a Nation, Obama's America, 2000 Mules, which woke me up. And the one that scared me the most, we talked about this a minute ago, was Police State. And now he joins us on Awakened Nation with his new film and book of the same title, Vindicating Trump. Thank you for today, my friend.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah. I have to give a big shout out to Chris Widener for making this happen. And he's a good friend of the show. But I wanted to dig in deeply right off the bat. You wrote a phenomenal article in the American Thinker, and you talk about three types of assassination. First is character assassination, second is legal assassination, and the third is the physical assassination, which Trump has survived too. But you compared what happened to President Trump to the Lincoln assassination. And I quote, John Wilkes Booth and his co-conspirators were Confederates. Their minds had been poisoned by years of propaganda. Sounds familiar, right? Booth genuinely believed Lincoln was a tyrant, and his political motive was to get rid of Lincoln and energize the Confederacy to fight on even harder. Let's start there, because that's powerful in comparison to today.
Well, first of all, notice that the effort to kill Lincoln was not a conspiracy theory. It was an actual conspiracy, right?
Yes.
John Wilkes Booth had recruited a bunch of accomplices. Their plan was to kill the president and the vice president and the secretary of state all at the same time.
Wow.
And they succeeded with Lincoln. And one of the conspirators got cold feet, and one of the plots failed. But when John Wilkes Booth shot Lincoln, he jumps from onto the stage at the Ford Theater, and he shouts in Latin. He shouts "Sic semper tyrannis," which basically means this is the way it goes with tyrants. So think about it. They were accusing Lincoln of being a tyrant. They were saying, in a sense, Lincoln is an existential threat to democracy. Lincoln is a threat to the republic. We need to eliminate this guy and the country will be better off. I'm sure John Wilkes Booth thought of himself as a hero. So
Yeah.
all of this is applicable to our situation because the Democrats have been poisoning the wells, they've been poisoning the water. They have been laying the logical basis for assassination by saying that Trump is Hitler circa 1933. Then you have two would-be assassins that actually try to carry out the extermination of Trump. And somehow Trump turns the table. Somehow Trump survives. Somehow Trump uses those assassination attempts to reveal his own exemplary courage and bravery.
Yeah. Well, as of today, when we're recording this, the media has compared the rally that Trump had just had at Madison Square Garden to a similar rally the Nazis had in 1930. They say he's going to be a dictator on day one. What is causing people to believe such nonsense?
So the arguments on the surface are too crazy to take seriously. They'll say, well, there was another America First rally in 1939. Well, first of all, that's not true. The Nazi rally of 1939 was the opposite of America First. It was actually Germany First. This was organized by a bunch of German and German American organizations to draw America to the side of Germany in the emerging world war. And that was the agenda. Now, Trump has been in office. You know, it's one thing to say about someone that you don't know, hey, this guy will do this and that guy will do that. It makes no
Yeah.
sense when you're saying this about somebody who has, first of all, been in American public life for decades. Trump was a massive cultural celebrity long before he ran for president. And he's been in office for a term. My
Yeah.
wife says that if he was a dictator, he's the worst dictator in the history of the world. He didn't prosecute any of his opponents. He didn't even control the police agencies of his own government. What dictator ever loses an election? So, you know,
Yeah.
Trump doesn't actually score very high on the dictatorial scorecard. So, on one level, it makes no sense. But on another level, it's a very sly and cunning accusation, I think, because, and this is a point I make in the book, Vindicating Trump, and the film, is Trump does have a certain kind of unusual power that is, I think, unique to him.
Yeah.
I ask in the conversation with Trump in this film, I ask him this question. I said, you know, they keep saying you called for an insurrection on January 6th. And in fact, you didn't do that. But guess what? Had you called for one, there would have been one, a real one.
Yeah.
And there'd
Yes.
be one if you called for one today. So you alone in this country, that I can tell, has that kind of power. Are you aware that you have it? What do you intend to do with it? And you can see like the surprise in Trump's face, you know, the tumblers of his mind working. It's a very interesting kind of exchange with Trump. But I think the left correctly recognizes that he is not a normal Republican. He
No.
poses a greater threat to them, not to the country, not to the Constitution, but to the Obama scheme of remaking America.
Let's talk about that because me personally, I see communism creeping into our country. And I know that has become a dirty word to the point where people, if they utter it, they just ignore what's coming out of your mouth afterwards. But it's true. I see the warning signs. So let's talk about Obama's America and how he's behind some of this.
Obama was, this goes back to a lot of my earlier work, motivated by a deep hatred of America and the West, a hatred he got from his anti-colonial father.
Right.
And Obama confesses to it. You know, this is the theme of his book, Dreams from My Father. And what Obama was able to do is combine this anti-American ideology with a certain type of gangsterism. And by gangsterism, what I mean is and this would not be unique, by the way, to communist countries, because the old Soviet Union was not held together by a unifying ideology of communism. It was
Right.
basically a gangster regime in which the Politburo was sort of like a mafia running the
Right.
whole country with mafia consigliaries and mafia operations spread out throughout the whole society. That's, I think, what the Democrats are trying to create here. And so they're offering people on their own side roles in this mafia. And you got to remember that tyranny is often very appealing to people. It's very appealing to use power over your neighbors. Think of the old town, busybody who would go around looking into people's bedrooms and reporting people.
Yeah.
That person got a lot of pleasure out of seeing people destroyed, humiliated, locked up, the scarlet letter. So we shouldn't have the illusion that when you're looking for a tyrant, you need to find some guy with a Stalin overcoat or a Hitler mustache. No, tyranny comes in various forms, and there's also a great appeal to it.
I find that between Obama and Kamala, or Kamala, as you're supposed to say it, there's a mystery to their backgrounds. They didn't grow up in the United States, and yet they claim, I'm middle class. I grew up middle class in America. They did not. They grew up in other countries, and they mysteriously slip into our republic, and suddenly they rise to fame so quickly. Is there a mystery behind that, or do you see that as well?
I'm very knowledgeable about Obama, a little bit less so about the particularities of the Kamala story, although I know a fair amount about the fact that she's descended from the largest slave owner in Jamaica.
Yeah.
I'm aware of some of this, and I do think that there are very odd sort of lacuna or gaps in the Obama story.
Yeah.
Just things about Obama that you would know about a normal person, let alone a normal person who's running for high office. And in Obama's case, they are mysteriously missing. So that's
Mhm.
true. That being said, I don't think that the problem with Obama is so much the fact that he was like born in Kenya or anything like that. I think that the problem is the reason that a lot of people were attracted to the birther movement and said Obama can't be born here is that they were listening and watching Obama and they're like, this guy doesn't even sound like he's from America. So they
Right.
they smelled the anti-American ideology and they assumed that it must be that he physically didn't come from America. I think that the real problem is not that he physically didn't come from America. Let's remember, let's even say if Obama was born in Kenya. Guess what? His mom was an American citizen. I mean, no one denies that.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
could have gotten citizenship that way. I don't think it would have prevented him from running for president. There are other people who've run for president. I mean, John McCain was born in a military base in Germany. Ted Cruz was born in Canada, but born to parents who are American citizens. So the point is not the fact that they were not born here or raised here, but rather that they have somehow become contaminated with a deeply anti-American ideology.
Mhm. Yes. I want to get back to the film Vindicating Trump. We're going to roll a clip right now, and I want everybody to sit back and enjoy and watch these interviews and some of the things that are going on. So roll the tape.
Somebody has to help this country, and if they don't, the country and the world are in big trouble.
Someone's got to overturn the tables in the temple.
Trump jumping into the presidential race.
She's a bit worried.
Of the Apprentice guy?
You know the feeling of power. Could you handle it or would it devour? Power.
They fear that power. You didn't do an insurrection. Had you called for one, there would have been one. And there would be one if you called for one now.
I'm not sure I want that power. I want the power just to make the country better.
America first!
And that scares them.
A lot about Donald Trump scares them.
Let's look at everything. Campaign, his family. Let's get foreign eyes on him.
We have one target. You know who he is.
Going after their companies, their families. That is a dictator.
It's a very dangerous time for our country.
The goal is to put him in jail because they're so afraid of his voice.
I am your voice!
We'll bury him so deep in legal, it'll bankrupt them.
Broke Donald in jail right before the election.
Sorry for being that guy, but Isn't that election interference?
It's not interference if we do it.
We just want a free and fair election.
Sounds expensive.
Ballots ain't cheap.
Wait. Did you actually say the word buy the ballots?
We were able to purchase 10,000 ballots.
That's terrifying.
They cheat in many different ways. That's all they're good at.
Ready to save democracy?
We need to stop him permanently.
And that person will be risking his life.
Too bad it's not the 60s, right?
It's the way you survived.
And I said, get me up.
Trump has beaten back every attack against him.
It's like the damn Terminator.
We're going to fix our borders, or we're going to fix our elections. We're going to win.
This is my legacy.
Vindicating Trump.
The best is yet to come.
This scared me in the film, and it scared me in 2000 Mules as well. But you can buy ballots. That blew my mind. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I hired a couple of investigators and I told them, look, in 2000 Mules, we were looking in the rear view mirror. We made that film in 2022. We're looking at what happened in 2020. And I'm very proud of that film because it used very ingenious technologies, namely cell phone geo-tracking and video surveillance, to look back and say, you know what, you can actually see what happened at the scene of the crime, so to speak. But I said in 2024, they're not going to be able to cheat in exactly the same way, because if mules show up in the middle of the night with backpacks full of ballots and latex gloves, and they're taking photos of the ballots going in the box, patriots are going to be looking for that. 25 million people have seen 2000 Mules. It's going to be really hard to pull off exactly the same heist, rob Fort Knox in exactly the same way. So I said to myself, all right, let me put myself in the mind of the criminals and say, if I were to do it the next time around, how would I do it? So now we're looking forward. And I hired a couple of investigators and I told them, why don't you go check into things? Find me some vulnerability. Show me the open door at Fort Knox where they can go in and take out all the gold. And these guys came back and they said, well, we found out that you can actually make ballots. And I go, make a ballot? They go, no, make 10,000 ballots, make any number of ballots. And I go, well, that's crazy. I see myself as someone reasonably knowledgeable about election fraud. I thought you have to get ballots from the state. If you're in Maine, the state of Maine will send you your ballot. And they go, well, think about this. Where do you think the state of Maine gets its ballots from? Answer, they order ballot stock. They have specifications and they go to printing companies and they say, make us ballot stock that is paper that's so thick and it's of these dimensions. And it turns out those printing companies sell that paper on the open market. You can actually order ballot stock delivered to your door. And then I said, well, okay, but that's only the paper. That's the stock. What about the information that's on the paper? And these guys told me, well, guess what? All you have to do is ask your state to send you an absentee ballot. Now, notice that an absentee ballot is not a sample ballot. It doesn't go sample or anything like that. It's a real ballot, right? And it doesn't have a watermark and it doesn't have an identification code. It's basically all the printed material you need to create a real ballot. So you take the ballot stock, you go down to your local printing company with a sample absentee ballot and just run off copies. And guess what? Those are real ballots. Those ballots, if you put them in the printer, in the tabulating machine, would be counted. So all of this is demonstrated in the movie in a very scary way. What it tells me really is that we have a lot of work to do to fix our elections. Ultimately, I think we do need ballots that are similar to $20 bills in that they have that level of security. Our ballots just don't. Look, once I found out this stuff, I took it straight to Laura Trump at the Republican National Committee. I mentioned it to Donald Trump. And so they're aware of it. They know about all this. And so hopefully there's a heightened vigilance this time around that prevents the election from being rigged and stolen the way it was in 2020.
I agree. I mean, this scared me. I had Mindy Robinson on my show a few years ago, and she was part of the team that was auditing Las Vegas, Nevada here. And they found, fraud. And when they went to report it, the website went down, the people resigned. I mean, it was chaotic. But when I put that show up, YouTube banned it immediately. I could not talk about it, even though she was on the committee. And so I see this coordinated effort now, and I think we all see it. And I wanted to ask you, I'm sitting here getting very frustrated because I met Donald Trump in 1996 at a Forbes event. And I was impressed with him living in New York City all these years. And it just breaks my heart to watch the news media not only just attack him, but the made up accusations, the moving misdemeanors, which misdemeanors, by the way, are like parking tickets and speeding tickets, elevating them to felonies just because they want to go after this man. They've even changed the law and broken the law to go after Trump. Do you think maybe they're scared of him?
Well, this is what's going on. Before I came to America, my favorite genre of movie was the Western. That was my main exposure to America initially. And in the typical plot of a Western, you've got a small town. It's called Shinbone or Pleasantville. We may as well call it America because it's running pretty well and it's got an old sheriff. And I think of that guy as like Paul Ryan. It's like the GOP establishment. But then some ruthless gangsters take over the town and they shoot the place up and they take over the saloon and the provision store. Everybody's terrified. And the gangsters have proven that there's nobody in the town that can overturn their operation. They've got it locked down. And Shinbone is not Shinbone anymore, right? But then over the mountain comes the Clint Eastwood figure, the lone gunman, the outsider. That's Trump. Now, the remarkable thing is that even though the townspeople don't understand this gunman, they don't understand the outside. Oh, who is this guy? What's his background? He seems like he's very shady. We know nothing about him and so on. The truth of it is the gangsters have a more accurate appraisal. They recognize right away, this is the guy who could take us all down. So they mobilize against him. So if you want to understand, like, why is it Trump? Like, why only Trump? The answer is that from the point of view of the gangsters, the Democrats, they can handle Paul Ryan. They know how to deal with any other Republican. They've got them under control, but they can't control Trump. And Trump is an 800-pound gorilla that is fully equal to the task of taking on the 800-pound gorilla on their side. And the 800-pound gorilla on their side, by the way, is not Kamala Harris. She's the ventriloquist dummy of the 800-pound gorilla, as you know. But collectively, the left is an 800-pound gorilla, and Trump is their equal, and that's why they're so desperate to get him.
Yeah. My big problem is I have close friends. I've lost a couple of friends, and I just recently had a discussion with another friend, and she just cannot vote for Trump. And a lot of times it's TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. And I can never understand it. And the only way I can compare it is I went out to dinner with a friend a few years ago, Dinesh, and we're sitting there for 2.5 hours having this amazing discussion about his career. Young guy, his career was taking off in the music industry. 2.5 hours we're talking. And then we got into the discussion of working out. And I had just gotten my black belt in Kempo Jiu-Jitsu. Dinesh, he was sitting across from me, turned white as a ghost, broke out in cold sweats and started stammering. And he got up and he left the restaurant. And I'm chasing him, paying the bill, go outside. And I said, David, what is wrong? And he's like, you can kill me. You know how to kill me. And I had to call a friend to come pick him up because nothing I said, no logic whatsoever, was going to get rid of this phobia that made him so petrified of me all of a sudden after a 2.5 hour conversation. And this is Trump derangement syndrome. Now I understand it. These people have had something build up inside them so massive, so great. This is how they're acting. How do you talk to people like this, or do you even bother anymore?
Well, the way I would begin with somebody like this is I would say, look, the people that have told you this, have put you up to this, so to speak, don't believe it themselves. This is the dirty secret of all the people who have invented the Hitler charge against Trump. Think of a guy like Chuck Schumer. If you watch the Al Smith dinner in New York, you would see moments where Trump and Schumer are like shooting the bull. They're like backslapping each other. It was like Reagan and Tip O'Neill in the old days. Similarly, Bill and Hillary Clinton were at Trump and Melania's wedding. You can see them beaming, they're cracking jokes, they're having a great time.
Yeah.
This was not, socializing with Hitler from their point of view at all. So the point is, these people know better. But what they're doing is they are sowing the seeds of hatred. And there's evidently intelligent people who are hearing this stuff who believe it. And I genuinely think that there are going to be Democrats, if and when Trump wins, they're going to be shaking with fear. They're going to be palpitating. They're going to be like your friend running out of the restaurant because they think they're going to be concentration camps. They're going to come lock me up. So to you and me, this is like you're out of your mind. But you have to remember that those people have been subjected to uninterrupted years of propaganda while hearing little or nothing on the other side. They have not had, skepticism injected into them. To this day, these are people who will show up like with a mask and take the view that if some guy in a white coat tells it to you, it's got to be true. Now, remember, there's a lot of conditioning that goes behind this, right? Every time we go to a doctor, the doctor goes, come in next Tuesday. We got to take your appendix out. We're normally like, okay, I'll be there. So this has become part of the way we think about the medical community. And it's taken a lot of critical intelligence for us to go, you know what? You lied to us during COVID. You didn't censor us because what we were saying was misinformation. In fact, you were putting out the misinformation. You were trying to protect your misinformation. So it's more like you and I have had our consciousness raised, and they haven't. They are still in that primitive, barbaric state where, because this is the chant of the tribe, they're going to chant along with it.
Wow. That's why I called the show Awakened Nation, because I felt, people were waking up all over the world and seeing what's going on. As we're recording this, the New York Times went after Ben Shapiro, Benny Johnson, and even the Babylon Bee, saying they're going to go after them for misinformation. This is a tactic of the left, of communists. Are they getting that desperate that now it's just ridiculous to me. Look at Gavin Newsom. He's trying to stop, deep fakes and things like this. Are they really that desperate at this point?
They miscalculated big time. And they don't have the opportunity that was presented to them in 2020. In 2020, Jane Fonda said COVID is God's gift to the left. And it was. And they were able to run with it. Now they don't have that. And they miscalculated with Biden. They thought, listen, this guy is a little brain dead. He's a bit of a zombie, but that's okay. We'll make him our ventriloquist dummy, and we will tell him what to say and do. But they didn't expect his mind to be so badly fried that the guy could barely show his face in public. So when that happened, they were like, now what? And unfortunately, the next person standing in line was the giddy and idiotic Kamala Harris. I'm sure they were thinking about, is there a way to leapfrog over her, put a millstone around her neck and have her sleeping with the fishes? But they couldn't think of a way to do that. And so they're stuck with her. So this is their problem. And that they now need to figure out what, even the 2 assassination attempts didn't do the trick. So now it's down to essentially censorship and election rigging. I don't think those are their options right now. And they're probably going to try both.
Well, we're getting reports from my hometown area, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, that they found major voter fraud. Texas, Illinois, Tennessee, and I think there's one other state. They found that there are problems. The machines are flipping. They found this, and this isn't made up or conspiracy theory. This is hitting the regional and local news hard, because I've called friends in my hometown. They said it's on the news everywhere here locally, but not nationally.
It's going to be interesting to see if they try the good old slogan that 2024 is the most secure election in U.S. history.
Yes.
I think we're already past that stage.
There's a great meme going out, and maybe I'll send it to you guys. It shows Kamala, and it's the Star Wars scene where Princess Leia leans down and puts the disc in R2-D2 and says, you're my only hope. Well, it's her, but it's a Dominion box, and it says, Dominion, you're my only hope. And it's just hilarious, because it is.
I think I might have seen that one.
That one's funny. Something that you said on another podcast is you say fascism always comes from the left. Can you just talk about that briefly, and then we're going to wrap up?
Sure. The fascism, along with communism, socialism, progressivism, all of these are ideologies that are akin to one another. They're cousins. They all developed roughly around the same time, the very early part of the 20th century. They all developed on the left. And this is not me assigning a spot to fascism. Mussolini was he was a prominent Marxist in Italy. He was the editor of like the official Marxist journal. He had published widely on Marxist theory. If you look at the founders of fascism in about 5 different countries, and I've written a book on this called The Big Lie. You look at the founders of fascism, people like Oswald Mosley in Britain. You look at the fascists in Belgium, in France, in Italy, in Germany. All of them come out of the socialist camp. They all come from the left or from the far left. And so fascism has never had anything to do with the right. Now, very interestingly, after World War II, when the concentration camps were opened and all those sickly, emaciated people were dragged out of it, the left realized, oh my gosh, we can have nothing to do with what caused that. So a panic set in on the left in this country, and there was a massive intellectual whitewashing operation that was begun. And essentially what it was aimed at doing is, let's disguise, camouflage, muddy all the connections between fascism and the left. Let's try to move fascism into the right-wing camp. So fascism had to be completely redefined. Now fascism meant nothing more than being a strong man and being a dictator, and that's fascism. No, fascism is a full-blown ideology with a whole set of economic and social and foreign policy and racial ideas. All of that was kind of washed away, as if to say that any dictator from the beginning of time, I mean, Attila the Hun, was a dictator. He's a fascist. No, he wasn't a fascist. There was no such thing as fascism, and that Genghis Khan was not a fascist. Yes. Louis XIV was not a fascist. Fascism is a phenomenon of the early 20th century, and it's an outgrowth of Marxism and socialism.
Powerful, powerful. Ladies and gentlemen, go see Vindicating Trump and pick up the book, please. I'll leave everything in the show notes. Very powerful conversation. I want to have these interviews that you just did with Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, and I'm going to roll the tape one more time.
Trump is a certain kind of a giant. He is a larger-than-life figure, and that scares them.
Well, a lot about Donald Trump scares them. I'll never forget when we all sat down just before he announced he was running for president in 2015, and he said, listen, this is something I want to do, guys. I need you guys to understand that they're not just going to come after me, they're going to come after all of us. And I need to know if you're okay with that. And of course, we were like, yeah, how bad could it possibly get?
Little did you know.
Little did we know. I think he really knew deep down that going against the current and going against the natural progression of things as it relates to our government was going to be very tough for him to do, and he still decided to take it on.
He was such a cool figure in the culture, right? Hanging out with Oprah, and the rappers wanted to be seen with him. And what you're saying is that he was aware that he was putting all this in jeopardy, because by shaking up the system, powerful forces would become arrayed against him, even some of the people who were previously on his side.
He knew. He was so right. I think the way he has exposed rot within our government and agencies that people really didn't even know to look for. He exposed a lot of people who really had been bad actors acting in nefarious ways, and I think that's very upsetting and that scares them.
But do you think with Trump, he's running really because he thinks the country is in bad shape and he's the right guy to fix it?
He's the only guy. He's our only option because he's not bought by anybody. He is for America first. And that's frightening to people that have side deals, that have corruption. Well, then, of course, you're afraid of the one person that doesn't have any other interests.
Trump has the dimensions of a Caesar, but he has no intention of being one.
We were all about democracy, and that's what we're about. And, their theme is, oh, Trump will subvert democracy, but they're the ones that are going to subvert democracy, and that's what they're doing all the time.
I mean, did you do censorship? No. Did you lock up any leading Democrats? No. I mean, there were people chanting for Hillary to be locked up, but you didn't lock her up.
Let's defeat her in November.
Well, with Hillary as an example, I thought it would be a terrible thing, actually. What she did was terrible. What Biden did was terrible. What they all did. But I never would even think of doing that. I could have done it, and we had them dead to right, but wouldn't it be a terrible thing? And yet now, what they've done is they've opened up a box, a Pandora's box, that is a very dangerous thing.
The left and the Democrats say, you want to come in a second time and you will never leave. Now, you have trolled those people by putting out funny memes about Trump 24, Trump 28, Trump 32, but I think of the Western, where the good guy comes in, he takes care of the bad guys, he fixes the place, and at the end of the movie, he leaves.
And they said that the first time, too. He's never going to leave. Of course I'm going to leave. We'll have plenty of time to fix the country. And we have great people. You know, we have great backup. Somebody will take over and they'll do a good job.
I mean, think, Alina, about oppressive and tyrannical societies, right? The Soviet Union, think of Cuba, North Korea, the Middle East, Venezuela. So here's what they have: widespread censorship.
Right.
They have mass surveillance of citizens. They have ideological indoctrination in the schools and the media, criminalization of political differences, locking up your opponent or worse. All of these things are now present in America, but they're not coming from Trump.
They're coming from them.
They're coming from the Democratic Party.
Locking them up, going after their companies, their families, their associates, their lawyers, putting them in jail, scaring people from being around that person, that if you do, you'll be persecuted, you'll be prosecuted. That is a dictator, and that is what we are living through at this moment.
Honored to have you on the show today. And I'm well known, by the way, for asking one or two deeper questions so everybody gets to know you better, Dinesh. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is you always speak so eloquently about your wife, Debbie. And I want to ask you, I'm sure she's very proud of the work you're doing, but what's your favorite memory with your wife?
Well, I think I was very much dazzled by her from the time I met her. She is originally from Venezuela and came to the United States at the age of 10, not speaking English. And so even though we came at about the same time, we both have had a kind of immigrant experience. And even though we were raised at opposite ends of the world, I mean, me in Mumbai, India, and her in Caracas, Venezuela, it is actually surprising how similar our upbringing was. In other words, our grandmothers thought the same way and talked the same way and had the same kinds of habits and priorities. When I brought Debbie to India for the first time, I was like, listen, I've got to prepare you for this. You're in for major culture shock. She gets there. She's like, this is how I grew up. All these people are completely recognizable to me. You know, your great aunt is exactly the way my grandmother was, and so on. So I realized that there's a certain very peculiar cultural kinship around the world, even in very different environments. And but that's a little glimpse into our original meeting.
It's funny because if you notice my last name, it's Hungarian, and my grandparents escaped Hungary in the 1920s to get away from the communists because they shot one of our relatives, and they came over here and they met in Lancaster County and fell in love. And I wasn't raised, my dad was the first generation born here in America, but I wasn't raised like most Americans. I was raised very European. We spoke a little Hungarian up until I was 10. And there seems to be this power of the immigrant in America. And this is really the foundation of our country, 100%, my friend. Thank you.
I agree. I agree. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it and enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much, Dinesh. Thank you for being on Awakened Nation. And I'll say bye for now. Hey, everybody, tune in next week. We're going to have another extraordinary guest here on Awakened Nation. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for being a big part of the Awakened Nation movement. This is how you can help me and our extraordinary guests. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share this episode out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And let's grow this movement by word of mouth. Our success is because of you. Thank you, and see you next week.